And so Prabhupada saw that no one was getting up, and he wanted them to have Mangal Arati. So he got up and took a cold bath, even though he was sick, to set an example. Sometimes Prabhupada was ill, and he was too ill to give Bhagavatam class. But he would come to the Bhagavatam class, and he would sit down and he'd ask his one disciple, say, "You speak." And he would just listen. And then he would get inspired, and like halfway through the class he would start talking, even though his energy wasn't coming from his physical platform. It was coming from the spiritual platform. And when devotees weren't following the program, then Prabhupada said, "But I'm going. You're not going, but I'm going." So he said, don't try to be a better Paramhansa than your guru. And this Paramhansa means you don't need to go, right? You don't need to follow. He says, but I'm going, why you're not going? So Prabhupada was very careful about setting an example of what we should be doing, and controlling any emotions that would be misunderstood or perhaps imitated. Right? Okay, so that's the little history. Is that okay? I'll tell you another story. This is so nice. I was just thinking, there's not much in the verses and purports, so don't worry. We'll get to them, but there's not. So I wanted, trying to tie in some things about Prabhupada that may be of value or interest to you, and historical that you may not know. You probably know that when Prabhupada came to the West, he said, he once remarked that I was never alone. I always felt that my spiritual master was with me. Right? He said, I never felt alone. Sometimes he would say, I didn't know which way to go. Should I go left? Should I go right? He said, I'm just alone here in New York. I don't know. And sometimes Prabhupada didn't have facility to cook, and he was going to sleep hungry. Did you know that? And then sometimes he said, I couldn't sleep because I was hungry. There was no place to cook. So he was going through a lot, as we know. And so one time he said, even though I was alone and there was so much trouble, I never felt alone. I always felt my spiritual master was with me. So in 1970, San Francisco was the only place in the world, well, no, you had Rath Yatra. When was the first Rath Yatra here? 1969, 70? Anybody know? 71? Anyway, 73 was the first? Was it? Really? Okay, so that means in 1970, San Francisco, which Prabhupada named as New Jagannath Puri, it's by the ocean, that was where the first Rath Yatra started in 1967. So still, 1970 is the first Rath Yatra. Now, in 1970, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness had 17 centers around the world. Did you know that? Average center had, I would say, a liberal estimate, 12 devotees. Who knows what 17 times 12 comes out to? That's how many devotees were in the Hare Krishna movement. The average temple in 1970, the number of congregational members, 2 or 3. Those are usually one family, right? 1 or 2 families. That was, I don't know about here, but the average temple in America didn't really have congregation. It was like just a handful of people at most. So 17 temples around the world. I looked in BTG, I think 6 of those 17 were in California. And that's where I was. And so that gives about 11 temples the rest of the world. And we'll say 12 devotees per temple. Let's knock it up to 20 with congregation. So maybe 350 Hare Krishna devotees in the world in 1970. And in San Francisco, about 150 or 200 of them were there for Rath Yatra. So for us to see 200 devotees in one place then was phenomenal. You know, it was like, in this room was like half the Hare Krishna movement, you know, in 1970. So what happened was, devotees were coming from all over the United States, maybe some from other part of the world, and assembling there. So this was like the largest gathering to date. And in 1970, I would say 90% of the movement were brahmacharis and brahmacharinis. 90, 80, you know, pretty, yeah. 80, just somewhere between 80 and 90%. All right, 75%. Mostly brahmacharis, brahmacharinis. So, Prabhupada was coming, I was there, I was living in the temple. We were working like crazy to get Rath Yatra together. We would do the whole Rath Yatra in 2 weeks, which included building the cart from scratch. And average devotees slept 4 hours a day. That was just how we did it. And everybody got sick the day after. Yeah, everybody. That was the ritual. You work 2 weeks, you sleep 4 hours, and on Sunday night you go to sleep and you wake up whenever you're better. That was just like, we accepted that. That was the mood. So we were all, you know, very enthusiastic for Rath Yatra, and Prabhupada was coming. So he came to the door of the temple, and it was a small storefront. And the temple was full of brahmacharis with freshly shaven heads and tilak, and polyester dhotis. And polyester dhotis, they retained their colors, so they were shiny peach. Like Gadagraj's chadar, like that color, but because it was polyester, it was shiny and there were no wrinkles in it. So you had a room full of shiny-headed, shiny dhotid. I didn't think there were even enough room for women. It was like packed wall to wall. So Prabhupada came to the door and then he stopped. He didn't walk in. He just stopped and he looked. And he was smiling. And if you've ever seen Prabhupada smile, it's like, when Prabhupada smiles, it's like the sun god has descended. It's like, I've never personally, I don't know, maybe I'm subjectively prejudiced, but the effect of Prabhupada's smile was just heart-melting and extremely satisfying, uplifting, and other words which I don't have to describe, which have not been yet created in the English language to describe the experience of Prabhupada's smile. So there he was at the door, and he was smiling, and he was looking at all these brahmacharis. And like I say, this was the largest gathering, you know. Like half the movement was there, and most of them were brahmacharis. So he's just standing at the door. So why isn't he coming in? He's just looking and smiling. So he finally walks in, and he sits down on his vyasasana, and he does something that he never does when he comes to a temple. Usually comes to a temple, have some kirtan, and he'll give what we call an arrival address. He does something different. It was about noon. I particularly remember it was around noon or 12:30. He sits on his vyasasana and he chants the Guru Vashtaka prayers to his spiritual master. So we're like, okay, whatever. We have no idea why. And basically, we're young devotees, so we don't really have any idea why anything's going on. So Prabhupada's chanting Guru Vashtaka is as confusing as wearing kopans and don't eat with your left hand and take a cold shower. It was all just confusing. So, okay, he's chanting Guru Vashtaka. That's strange, but everything in this movement is strange. It's just another strange thing. But still, we noticed it was strange. Like, why? Why is he doing that? Would you like to know why? We didn't know why. But later that day, Prabhupada revealed why. And Prabhupada said, when I came and saw all these devotees, I was so moved and impressed and inspired. I stood at the door and I called my Guru Maharaj to come see. So Prabhupada he calls his Guru Maharaj to come see all the devotees. That's why Prabhupada was standing at the door. And that explains why he was chanting Guru Vashtaka. So when Prabhupada says, I never felt separated from my Guru, there's your proof. He could call his Guru Maharaj. And what does Prabhupada say in the Chaitanya Charitamrita? He says, my spiritual master is always seeing my activities. So is that an amazing way to live? You feel the presence of your Guru. And that's why Prabhupada could do what he did. There's a story, it's kind of a funny story. There was a young devotee, I think she was 17 when she joined, and her story of joining is so interesting. It is almost, it's like a story of a grandfather and a granddaughter, and it's almost like Prabhupada found a long-lost granddaughter and picked her up because he gave this devotee so much time and so much affection. It was so different from how he normally dealt with disciples. It was just like, this is my granddaughter. And so they had this relationship, and he would spend so much time with her, talking to her. So a few years later, she had become discouraged because ISKCON had gone from a very family-oriented movement to a very male versus female, Grihastha versus Brahmachari movement around early 70s, more or less 72. With the increase of brahmacharis, the preaching changed. So there was more emphasis on renunciation. And in order to maintain their renunciation, they were preaching about all the problems of marriage and the problems of female association and even the problems of just having the great misfortune of ending up in a female body and having even greater misfortune to be in the proximity of that female body if you're in a male body. So it changed the culture of ISKCON, and as the culture was changing, the family environment where brothers and sisters, was how we used to deal with the men and women, changed to kind of like, not brothers and sisters, but kind of like enemies. So she joined at a time when it was brothers and sisters, and then she started becoming the enemy. And so she had this relation with Prabhupada where she could just kind of stomp into his room and start complaining. So she walked into his room and just said, I quit. And so she explained how the men are treating her, and she said, that's it, I quit. And Prabhupada said, you cannot quit. If anyone has a right to quit, it's me. And then he went on to explain all the troubles he faced, how he would sometimes go to bed hungry, how his Gita was stolen, how he'd live with crazy people, and especially, now she said, I'm discouraged. And he said, you have no right to be discouraged. He said, if anyone has a right to be discouraged, I do, because I didn't get anybody's help. Not one person in India helped me. And Prabhupada saying in his books, I was never discouraged because I always felt my Guru Maharaj is with me. Isn't that nice? So you feel your spiritual master with you, you won't feel discouraged. And a lot of younger devotees, when they hear the history of ISKCON and they speak to older devotees, they'll say, how is it that you could stay through these difficulties? Because you feel your spiritual master is with you, and this is what he wants you to do. And how did Prabhupada come to America and risk his life? Because this is what his guru wanted him to do. How did so many devotees traverse the difficulties that they faced in turbulent times in our movement? Because they felt Prabhupada wants them to tolerate and stick it out and do it. And that's how they've been able to do it. Yes? So that's my introduction to Jai Radha Madhava. Okay, so we'll chant. Yes, sir.
Who was the girl?
Kaushalya. Kaushalya. If you ever can listen to this story of how Kaushalya became a devotee, I don't know where I heard it. It's amazing. I wish I could remember the details, but what I remember is Prabhupada personally made her a devotee, and he gave her complete access to him, and they talked like they were just grandfather and daughter, completely informal, and she'd say, she wasn't a devotee yet, so she was interested in spirituality, but she'd say things that were not actually proper to say to Prabhupada, and he would just go along with it and just show his love and affection. It's an amazing story if you can find it. I think that story is unique. I've never heard a relationship like that with Prabhupada. She was 17 and living alone on the beach. So Prabhupada just grabbed her off the beach. Almost as if Prabhupada knew her and knew that's what he was supposed to do. And there are stories, from my perspective, that Prabhupada knew who this person was and was like, oh, that's you, we're back together again to spread Krishna consciousness. It seemed like that in some cases, like that kind of relationship, yes. Is that okay? Can I have an E, please? Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jana Vallabha Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yasodanandana Gajajanaranja Yashodanandana Gajajanaranja Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Yamuna Tira Vanachari Punjabi Hari Shri Radha Madhava ki Srila Prabhupada ki Go Premanand Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda We're reading from the Adi Lila chapter 15, and this is text 23. We'll go to text 29, and we'll chant text 29. And I will try to read without glasses, and if I fail, I will have to borrow someone's glasses. You have any? No? Yeah, it's better I use them. They're reading glasses, or?
Distance, if they're okay with you.
Mm-mm. It's the opposite. Okay. Yeah, that should work. Yep. They're reading, yeah. Okay. Katadina Rahi Mishra Gila Paraloka Mattaputra Duhara Vadila Vrida Shoka. After some days, Jagannath Mishra passed away from this world to the transcendental world, and both mother and son were very much aggrieved in their hearts. Bandhu Bandhava Ashid Dunha Prabha Dilo Pitri Kriya Vidhi Mate Ishvara Korilo. Friends and relatives came there to pacify both Lord Chaitanya and his mother. And Lord Chaitanya, even though he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, executed the rituals for his dead father according to the Vedic system. So, Lord Chaitanya took sannyas, apparently, externally, from a Mayavadi. Not actually, but externally, because that was the system and that's what was accepted. Bhaktivinoda Thakur took initiation from a Vikas Goswami because people had criticized him that you are preaching Vaishnavism and you're not even initiated. So the only person available at that time was a Vikas Goswami, but it was a Vaishnav, so he took Vaishnav Diksha to be accepted. As you probably know, Prabhupada installed the deities of Krishna Balaram in a standard Murti Stapana way, which is not the way we normally do, but in order to be accepted by the residents of Vrindavan as bona fide, he adopted that. And I had the fortune of being there, and part of what was being done was that pujas were being done to Prabhupada, where they were putting dyes on him and sandalwood and tying him with strings, and he'd have to throw rice here and there. And I was actually watching that being done to Prabhupada, and I could see from the expression on his face that he was just tolerating that because that's what people expected, and that would make our temple accepted. But you could see that he had really no interest in that. But he went along with it because that was the custom of the culture. So sometimes we will do that. And then you may know that when the devotees first went to India, at that time in the Hare Krishna movement, they went, I think, in November of 1970. So as I was saying before, at that time, the Hare Krishna movement, the only basic seva that we had, aside from a few small duties, was Harinam Sankirtan. That's what we did. So our nature, we were so accustomed to doing Harinam Sankirtan, it's like wherever we were, if there was nothing to do, that's what we would do. So the devotees had flown to India, and I think they had flown through somewhere in the Middle East that just had a war. And they got off the airplane, they were waiting on the tarmac, and it was kind of a volatile situation, and they just did Sankirtan, and there were guns pointing at them, but that's what we did. That was the preaching. So when the devotees went to India, they were doing Harinam Sankirtan, but they came to understand that at that time in the culture where they were, the only people that were doing Sankirtan were beggars. So the beggars would come and Hare Krishna, or shake their can or put out their hand. So people started to, I guess people told us that people will think you're beggars if you do Sankirtan. So they told that to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, stop. That was the only thing we were doing in the movement worldwide, and he stopped it. And he started a life membership program because the Harinam Sankirtan was misunderstood. Isn't that interesting? So we've heard Prabhupada say, we don't care about the culture, we don't care about people, we do it our way, they should come to our standard. We have our standards, we stick to them. But we see sometimes we would have to adjust. And one time, Prabhupada was giving Bhagavatam class, I was there, and he had just spoken to a scientist. And Prabhupada told us that last night I spoke to a scientist and I called him a demon. I said, you cannot understand Krishna consciousness because you're a demon. And then Prabhupada said, and he accepted. And he just started laughing. And so then Prabhupada said, I can do this. you cannot do this. He's giving us a warning, that, okay, people should adopt our standards, but there is a limit to what we can do, and sometimes we do adopt to their standard because it's important. So that was, Vrindavan was a case. This was a case where they stopped Harinam for a time in India because it was misunderstood. So we see Mahaprabhu, he's doing also. He took sannyas in that way. He followed certain principles, Brahminical life, because it was advantageous. So the point is, Prabhupada's analysis is it advantageous? Now, something amazing happened once. We had a temple. It was a rented building, and that temple had been there for 7 years. And then, after 7 years, the owner of the building, of the temple, said, I'm selling the building, and unless you give me $20,000 in 1 month, then I will sell it to somebody else. So it's like, oh, we're not going to have a temple in a month, and we don't have 20,000. So, of course, the word got out to the community that we're going to lose our temple if we don't come up with 20,000, and the temple didn't have 20,000. And 20,000 showed up. And the temple president knew where that 20,000 came from. And it came from some people, I will just say this, who didn't earn it exactly in the most honest way. And in fact, they earned it by doing something to encourage the breaking of one of the regular principles. Actually, to facilitate the breaking of one of our principles. So generally, if we know the source and we know that they're accumulating money that way, we would not take it because that means we're encouraging that sin. I know some other movements will, but we would not. And sometimes when Prabhupada knew about such money, he would say, I will not touch it, it's contaminated. He just, I don't want anything to deal with it. He said, if they want to give it to the deities, they can, but knowingly, I cannot accept this money, knowing that I would encourage the sin that these people are committing to give the money. So the temple president, he went to Srila Prabhupada and said, this is the situation, and here's the money. What do we do? And Prabhupada said, take it. So he was okay. He was happy. And they bought the building. Then later on, there was no emergency, but that same group of devotees offered money. So that same devotee went back to Prabhupada. He explained the situation, said, these devotees are making money by illegal means, by encouraging people, by facilitating people to break one of the regular principles. And they've just given a donation. Can we take it? And Prabhupada said, how can you take money that you have to take that encourages people to commit sin or to run a business that promotes sinful activity? He said, we cannot do that. He said, but Prabhupada, the last time they gave the money, you said we could accept it. And Prabhupada said, that was an emergency. We were going to lose our temple. We had to. We had no choice. So Prabhupada, sometimes very strict, sometimes very liberal, according to the situation. Yes? Oh.
What temple?
Laguna Beach. Then this whole, then there was a moral dilemma came up. Can we say things on Sankirtan that are not entirely true to sell a book? So it came to Prabhupada, because devotees were kind of sometimes, not entirely, not straight, I wouldn't say lying, but not maybe as straight as we felt we should be. And Prabhupada said, I never lied. I was thoroughly honest. I learned to sell a book by preaching. That's the highest. And then one devotee, you remember did you have these, we call them gas wars, there was a shortage of petrol and So a devotee would distribute a book and say, if you read this book, This is a book about how to solve the energy crisis problem. In other words, Krishna is the source of all energy, you serve him. So devotees thought, okay, he's lying. And they told Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, no, that's just intelligent preaching. So he didn't want us to lie, but at the same time, Prabhupada was very practical, and this worked, and he didn't see it as lying. And then in one letter, Prabhupada said, Krishna is unlimited, so you can say anything about him and it won't be a lie. So it's like, he'll solve the energy shortage, That's not a lie, because he's got unlimited energy. So Prabhupada was adjustable. He wasn't like only this way. Now I'll tell another story. This is one of the funniest stories and most embarrassing, and it has to do with me, so I can tell it. This was about this principle also of adaptation to please people or not to please people. So I would like to tell you the history, at least in America, and I think probably it came over here after America, the history of devotees doing Sankirtan in Western dress, book distribution in Western dress. This became a huge controversy in our movement. And the discovery of Sankirtan in Western dress was not someone's brainstorm that the lights went off in their head that we should wear Western dress. It was because devotees were distributing books in the best places to distribute books in America, which were the malls, but they were not allowed to distribute. But because it was the best place, they would go in and try not to get caught by security, and when they got caught by security, they would leave, and then they couldn't come back. So one devotee said, well, wearing a saffron dhoti and a shaved head and tilak, you stand out. And all the girls had long braids. That was the program, long braids and saris. So the devotee said, well, what if we just wore wigs and Western dress? Then the security wouldn't see us. So that's what they did. And it was just to avoid the security. What do you think happened after that? They realized that when you go up to someone with a shaved head, tilak, and a dhoti, not everyone stops because they know you're trying to sell them something, or you just look weird and they don't want to talk to you. So book distribution basically doubled. And that was just an accident, right? So ISKCON in those days, when anything good happened, even though there was no internet, the whole ISKCON world found out about it within a week. It was just like, this book distribution is doubling. Why? Because we're wearing shirt, trousers, and wigs. And the girls are wearing nice clothes. So it came to Prabhupada. Now this is interesting history. There's a lot of Prabhupada says, right? Yeah, you've heard Prabhupada said. Now, Prabhupada doesn't like broccoli. We heard that because somebody cooked broccoli and they didn't know how to cook it. He didn't like it. Or Prabhupada doesn't like grapefruit because they didn't put anything sweet on the grapefruit. And I just heard another Prabhupada doesn't like oats until oats are for horses, right?